going on, everybody? I'm back with another video, and this video is just going to be looking at a 4-4-2 and some key concepts to note when using this formation and how to use it effectively. So we're just going to move through the thirds of the field and mention things as we go. So the first thing I want to mention is when we enter the high block. As we know, compactness is compromised both vertically and horizontally. But typically, when the high block is implemented, teams will emphasize vertical compactness in their defensive phase, because this is more of a means that teams use to progress. Obviously, when teams emphasize vertical compactness, it's referring to the space between the defensive lines. So by creating more horizontal lines within your team, this will increase or create a more compact shape vertically, although you do lose width and horizontal compactness. So just so you know that. So this is the first thing we're going to be talking about. And I'm just highlighting the structure of the offense just really quickly. They're playing in a basic 4-3-3, and so now the first key point is the two forwards. And I'm just going to highlight them with a square. They're pretty much occupying the 6 at the present moment, and this is really important because most of the time the forwards will play staggered. And just a little detail here, by staggering your forwards, it makes it even harder for the player to play a vertical pass and eliminate or progress through the center. So if they're flat, it is possible, although it may be challenging. So it depends on the pressing patterns, but if they're more staggered, it just gives them multiple access points on different lanes. So, but we can play either way, just preference. So now going back to the vertical compactness component. So one thing many teams do is convert their 4-4-2 into a 4-2-2-2, and they do this by just advancing the wingers. So now, as we see here, this has just created 1, 2, 3, 4 vertical or horizontal lines, creating more vertical compactness because there is less distance between each of the lines with this added line between the forwards and the midfielders. But this isn't the only way you can create this dynamic. So if we put them back linear or in the same line, we can stagger opposite midfielders, and this creates multiple access points on different planes as well. So as we see, we have 2 deeper players controlling the space between the lines, as well as players further up the field to then cover when teams go to press. I'll make that a better example. So when teams go to press, they can cover different access points. So just really quickly, and just making it a little more realistic. And what I've done here is we still see this staggered shape of the 2 players, but now these deeper players, they have access, 1, between the lines here, and 2, they stay deeper to provoke the pass into a less dangerous area, and then they can shift. So just little details like that are really important for when using the high block. And then just one more last way that we can create vertical compactness in the high block. If we just reset the defense, we can also create almost like a 4-1-3-2 formation. And this is all preference. It often depends on the concepts the opposing team looks to carry out and progress the ball. But 4-1-3-2 can be effective if the space between the lines is more in a center area and a team is playing very high pressure, and the team in possession commits more players to their initial phase of build-up. So Now we're moving into the mid block. And just as I do this, I just wanted to let everybody know that I wrote a blog article highlighting some of these similar concepts. So if you guys want to check it out, it's on Medium. And I just wrote it in anticipation of this video being made. And it actually came from the Tottenham versus Everton FA Cup match. They both use 4-4-2s, but in different ways, slightly different ways. So that's where I got the idea to make this video. And if you want to check the blog article out on Medium, I'll post the link in the description below. So it'll be available to you. It's on Medium, so it should be free for everybody. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it if you decide to check it out. So now, just moving in to the mid block, and a slight change of structure for the team in possession now. Still building up with 2 players. Now the mid block is very unique in that it's very flexible. So if a team is playing a high line in the mid block to try and prioritize spatial control between the lines, they concede more space in behind. So when this happens, teams like Liverpool can get away with this. One, because they have excellent pressure from the front, and because of their qualities in the back between intelligence and on knowing when to drop and when to step, and as well as their qualitative aspects, so their physicality, for instance. But often, teams that play high lines also have to maintain a certain amount of pressure on the ball, so they don't have time and the freedom to just play balls into the space in behind the defense. Whereas teams that are more likely to drop off, they might be more space oriented. So teams that don't have much space or don't have the commitment to go and press, commitment meaning they don't have the players or the situation isn't right, they might be more likely to drop deeper into their low block to preserve the space in behind. So one concept I want to introduce in the mid block, which is appropriate, is just this staggering between lines of defenders and midfielders. And if you want to see a team do this in a case study for Atletico Madrid, are a great example of how they do this. I'm just moving the pieces a little bit. Maybe I can bring them on the weak side, try and make it as realistic as possible. So, and each of these players will be about 12 yards apart, give or take. And so now I've put these players in a position to stagger them diagonally. So now the players are on different horizontal lines, obviously, because midfielders and defenders, but they're also staggered on different vertical lines as well, which create these triangles, and it just uses the cover shadows to the most effective way possible. And it also takes into consideration the influence that the defenders have as well. So these players on the deeper line, they control the space where the cover shadows do not, which is pretty much the whole idea of the staggering, to just create very high level of spatial control. And that's why we see these triangles being formed between the 2 lines, and now the defense effectively controls the space between the lines, and this can happen with the forwards too. But I'm not going to waste your time and highlight all the triangles. So another thing about the weak side and the forwards is they're staggering as well, but the weak side stays higher because a pass all the way across the field, they would be able to effectively get there and cover in their positions by the time the ball travels. So staying higher is more advantageous, because if they decide to go and press, the players will be there quicker and be able to more effectively press and win the ball back. And now, one little point I didn't touch on before was, yes, there's more space in behind, and the compactness is variable from the defense, but we can also think of this as a positive in offensive transitions for the defense as well. So when teams play in their 4-4-2, they often face teams with two center defenders. So here in build-up, they're building up with two center backs, and they're effectively pinning or playing against two center forwards. So if an offensive transition were to happen here, and the ball were to go center, it would effectively be a 2 versus 2 through the central corridors in the offensive transition. So now in the low block, just moving the video along here, in the low block, it will be mainly concerned with spatial compactness, spatial control, vertical and horizontal compactness. And we didn't touch on diagonal compactness, that's for another video, but now we can focus on spatial control and some changes the shape might have to go through in order to carry out this concept. So in order to control the space, the team might have to concede a player in a higher area to bring him deeper. And why this is, because now the full width of the field is more important, because to progress around the width then goes diagonally to a goal. And once you get into the danger area, inside the penalty area, it's very high risk defending. So what taking a higher player would do to this setup would be if the 10 were to drop in to create a 5-4-1, it would give the midfielders more flexibility, and it would give them a higher horizontal spatial influence, meaning they'll have to travel less distance to control more space. And if teams would like, they can also create a back five to do this in a deeper area. And in a back five, it can be very hard because you have more players focused on defending the same line and creating the offsides, and stepping up and dropping with just more players can cause confusion. But when well drilled and well understood from the defenders, it can also create the advantage of players jumping and just create a little more freedom through the wide center backs to step into the space between the lines rather than dropping into it. So just something to think about when dealing with spatial control and your qualities as a team. But I'm going to wrap the video up there. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.